offering, as your saints bow down, as your people sing. We will rise with you, lifted on your wings, and the world will see that. Oh, yes, the world will see that. Our God says, our God says, and there is hope in your name. And morning turns to songs of praise. And our God says, our God says. Amen. We've only scratched the surface and only had just one glance. We've tasted of your glory, but there's so much more. We're standing on horizons where earth collides with heaven. You're longing for your children to cry out for more. We cry out for more. So let it echo from this city to the nations, the sound of praise, and let the windows of the heavens open wide and let it rain. We're here inside your presence, surrounded by your spirit. We're satisfied but desperate for even more of you, even more of you. So let it echo from this city to the nations, sound of praise, and let the windows of the heavens you high. We lift you high. Hands up, God, we lift your name high. Let all the other names fade away. Let all the other names fade away until there's only you. Let all the other names fade away. Jesus, take your place. Jesus, take your place. Sing that again, let all. Let all the other names fade away. Let all the other names fade away until there's only you. Let all the other names fade away. Jesus, take your place. Jesus, take your place. Let all. Let all the other names fade away. Let all the other names fade away until there's only you. Let all the other names fade away. Jesus, take your place. Jesus, take your place. Hands up. So hands up, hearts open wide as the sky. We lift you high. We lift you high. Hands up, hearts open wide as we cry. Oh God, we lift your name high. Hands up. So hands up, hearts open wide as the sky. We lift you high. We lift you high. Hands up, hearts open wide as we cry. God, we lift your name high, and our God, we lift you high. We lift you high. Hands up, God, we lift your name high. Oh, our God, we lift you high. We lift you high. Hands up, God, we lift your name high. Let all the other names fade away. Let all the other names fade away until there's only you. Let all the other names fade away. Jesus, take your place. Jesus, take your place. Let all the other names fade away. Let all the other names fade away until there's only you. Let all the other names fade away. Jesus, take your place. Jesus, take your place. Feel the rain of your love. the heartbeat of heaven, let us see. Feel the rains of your love, feel the winds of the Spirit. Now the heartbeat of heaven, let us see. Feel the rains of your love, feel the winds of your Spirit. Now the heartbeat of heaven, let us see. Good to know that we have shelter in God. Even when it feels like the world is on fire, we're in a very safe place. But we want more people to be in that safe place, not just us. We want to share it with the world. And unfortunately, the world doesn't know much of this safe place. So why don't we ask for spiritual rain in this place? More so than actual rain, we need spiritual rain. We need God to cool the world down. Sing it again, let it rain. Let it rain, let it rain. Open the floodgates of heaven. Let it rain, let it rain. Open the floodgates of We believe in a great God, amen?
Amen.
Keep with us as we sing some more songs.
mountains shake before the demons run and flee. At the mention of your name, King of Majesty, there is no power in hell or any who can stand before the power of the presence of the great I am. 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 The great I am.
So hallelujah, holy, holy, God Almighty, the great I am. Who is worthy, and none besides thee. You're the God Almighty, the great I am. Oh hallelujah, holy, holy, God Almighty, the great I am. So who is worthy? None beside thee. God Almighty, the great I am. God, we come to you and confess that we made a mess of this world. We really did. And still your grace is so abundant. Still your love is so great for us that you're willing to be a shelter for us. Still your power is so great that you will rise us up again. When the mountains fall and the tempest roars, you are with me. When creation falls, still my soul will soar on your mercy. So I'll walk through the fire with my head lifted high and my spirit revived in your story. And I'll look to the cross as my failure is lost in the light of your glorious grace.
many familiar faces that I haven't seen in such a long time. Yeah, so I've been in Austria for the past almost 10 months. I did a discipleship training school organized by a Catholic organization called the Loretto-Gemeinschaft. But it works closely together with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, and we had people coming from all over, from all kinds of different churches to teach us. And it was amazing. I learned so much, not just what people taught us, but actually just from living in a community, from getting to experience God in a daily basis, like learning how to serve, how to love. Yeah, a lot of things that you started to teach me when I first came here. What have I been up to? Yeah, as I said, a lot of teachings about lots of different subjects, like what the heart of the Father is about, why Jesus died for us, why it was just so lots of Holy Spirit stuff. I don't even know what it means to serve God, what it means that He's Lord of our lives, and what it means to give up our rights to certain stuff. We went on outreach, not as long as the YWAM people usually do, but we went for one shorter trip in Austria itself, and the other one our group went to 4 different countries, and my group went to, well, part of the group went to north of Italy, where I got to meet Irid as well, which is very, very nice. And we did lots of testimonies at school. We shared pantomime. We worked with kids. We worked with prayer groups all over. And that's also what we did in Salzburg itself. We worked with homeless people. We worked with refugees. We organized alpha courses. We organized healing prayer. We organized lots and lots and lots of things. Yeah. But what I learned most from was my private time with God. My private times that I went into the chapels and just got to say hi. And He just overwhelmed me with His love. He taught me when I was sick and couldn't serve like I wanted to, like everybody else was going out. And I was like, I want to serve too. And He's like, I know. Why? Why can't I serve? And He's like, because I first want you to learn that I'm serving you. And that's what that's one of the things He's been teaching me throughout the year. Also, what it means to be a child of God, what it means to be His princess. I told Him lots of times, let's go on an adventure, and He did. Lots of times it took me to solve a conflict between 2 friends that were otherwise, I don't think they were ever going to speak to each other again. It took me on a date with God. He taught me to waltz. It took me to lots of places and to lots of new friends. It took me to let other people into my life. It took me to take new steps, to go and be where I'm most fruitful. And that's actually why I'm planning to stay there a bit longer. I'm just here visiting for a week, then going back to Austria. And what's up ahead? Well, God knows. I'll try to look for a job and then part-time work for the mission base. I will hopefully be organizing a mission trip to Maastricht too, because lots of people have been excited to also preach the gospel here, and I'm like, oh, we need it so much, thank you. Hopefully to connect with you guys too. Yeah, I'm forgetting a lot of things now, but that's okay, I think. You can ask me lots of things later. There's one more thing I want to tell you. At the mission base in Salzburg, we have this thing called Worship Vacation, and anyone can come and stay there for free, have food for free, in exchange for 2 hours a day at the house of prayer downstairs and worship there or just sit there and pray. So if you're up for a free vacation, then come to Salzburg.
Good morning. So today I'm going to read from Luke chapter 10, verses 1 to 11, and then to verse 16. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. Do not take a purse or a bag or sandals, or do not greet anyone on the road. When you enter a house, first say, 'Peace to this house.' If a man of peace is there, your peace will rest on him. If not, it will return to you. Stay in that house, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Do not move around from house to house. When you enter a town and are welcomed, eat what is set before you. Heal the sick who are there and tell them, 'The kingdom of God is near you.' But when you enter a town and are not welcomed, go into its streets and say, 'Even the dust of your town that sticks to our feet, we wipe off against you.' Yet be sure of this, the kingdom of God is near." Verse 16. He who listens to you listens to me. He who rejects you rejects me. But he who rejects me rejects him who sent me.
With the weather that we've been having, I just want to say, Merry Christmas! Wait, this doesn't feel like Christmas to you? I lived for a few years on a Caribbean island, so I guess I'm a little more used to the hot weather when it's Christmas time. But my family's a little strange as it is, so we celebrate Christmas whenever we're kind of together. It's about who you're together with, not necessarily the day. And so in our family anthology, there was this one July where we had Grandma's Christmas in July. And that's just a proper mentality. It's July now, and so this reminds me of Christmas. My grandfather had died, and his birthday was in July. So I think part of the idea was Grandma wanted to have all of her family together for that, to go through that period. But she had all of these things that my grandfather had made. He did lots of hand woodwork sorts of things, and she wanted to sort of give those away as gifts. So that was Grandma's Christmas in July that we had with my family. I love my family. And my grandmother, she was a special lady. Wilma Lunders. I remember hearing later a story of her as a young woman. She was about 25 years old, and it was during the 1939-1940 World's Fair that was being held in New York City. Now, first, my parents and my grandparents all grew up in the small villages in South Dakota. If you don't know the United States, that's fine, but it's small, and it's the middle of nowhere. Like, you go for kilometers and kilometers and kilometers. The big city is like, oh, they have like 2,000 people. That's the big city that you go to. Like, it's just this small place. And so my grandmother, this 25-year-old single woman, travels a long way from middle of nowhere to go to New York City, which even then was this huge place, so that she could go to the World's Fair, which was this exposition that showed all of kind of the new things that were going on around the world. She was walking around at night after dark by herself on the streets of the big city. She was an adventurous woman, and liked to travel, and had this sort of wanderlust, it seemed, and wanted to get around. And so I think I picked up on some of that as well. And sometimes you're like, oh, you're just proud of your family. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But as my family liked to travel, we did. And now I'm an American who lives in Europe. But the first time I came over here, I was 12 years old. And it was over my grandma's 80th birthday. And we had a big family reunion that was happening. We flew into Frankfurt, and so it was people from all over the world that we never met, that they'd traced the lineage, and we're finding out all of this stuff, and I'm in Germany for the first time. My family, you've probably never met anyone else with the last name of Lunders. We're not known, we're not popular, we don't have a lot of famous people. But it was that trip that I actually found out I do have a famous relative. Sort of. Her name is Amelia Schindler. Now, the last name might ring some bells for you. Oskar Schindler is the man that they based the movie Schindler's List off of. Amelia and Oskar were people that were living in Germany at the time. In 1939, Oskar had joined the Nazi Party, or 1938, I think, just before the war. And then as the war started, he realized this is bad news. And so he eventually, through his factory, used that as a way to save Jews during World War II living in Germany. And he was just a few kilometers away from Auschwitz. He was the one person who actually got people out of Auschwitz during the whole war. If you went in, you died, except one time Oskar got 300 women out to work at his factory. So my relative was part of this, was someone who helped to save other people's lives. And as a kid, I was proud of that. That was cool. It sounded a bit like the parable of the good Nazi. You've probably never heard that one. And that title would be just as astonishing as a different story, one of Jesus' parables, the parable of the Good Samaritan. That one you might have heard of. There's a man who's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, and on the road towards Jericho, he gets beaten and mugged and left naked, left for dead. And these two other people go by him that you would expect would be the good people in the story, a priest, a religious man. They're supposed to help, but instead they pass by on the other side of the road, and then this Samaritan who's they were an unloved people group around Israel at that time period, but instead of being the one you expect to be the bad guy in the story, just like you would expect a Nazi to be the bad guy in the story, instead is the one who takes care of the man, who heals, or who puts balm on his wounds and starts to pick him up, take him on his donkey, takes him to a hotel. Pretty much shows him loving kindness and hospitality. And that word is kind of what I want to look at today, hospitality, of helping to take care of someone else. Making home for other people, and finding yourself at home among other types of people. So Jesus told that story of the Good Samaritan on the road towards Jericho, but Jericho is known for other parts of its history as well, even biblically. When I was a kid, I grew up and we would sing this song. Maybe you've heard it before. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. So there's that part of the story, which is a great thing, but not the one that I actually want to focus on. So in that story, the people of Israel, they had gone to Jericho and they were supposed to take the city, but they sent in 2 spies ahead of time. And those spies, as they're looking around in the city, finding out about it, they're about to get caught, and they end up finding a refuge, a place to stay, with a woman named Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute, was likely at the time that she was an abused woman, wasn't well known or well loved in the correct terms of love in her city, but she showed hospitality to these 2 spies, and she hides them so that they don't get caught. And later she says, show kindness to me for showing kindness to you, because I believe your God's going to win this battle. And she does survive. So when the walls came a-tumbling down, Rahab actually, and those that stayed with her, survive and are spared. And she gets to be a part of the story of the Israelites going further. So this woman, who was a foreigner to the Israelites, shows hospitality to two men. And the reason why I like that story, and I think it's special, especially with Jesus, as he's telling a story about heading to Jericho, about the Good Samaritan, is that when he thought of Jericho, maybe he was thinking about his great 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 grandmother. I counted that as the right number of greats. This is someone that was in his family. Just like I can tell you stories about my grandmother and how I'm proud of that. That's my mom. That's my grandma. Jesus, I think, would love that story of hospitality. He's like, that was my 29 grades grandmother. And the hospitality that she showed to people that are now my people, my nation. Hospitality was a part of Jesus' culture and part of Jesus' lineage. And it wasn't just the women in it. Women are sometimes known for being better at hospitality, but Jesus' great 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 grandfather was the King David. And for all of his faults, one of the stories that we have of something good that happens and that he does is he had become king when the guy who was the current king, Saul, and his son Jonathan died. Saul had acted like an enemy to David, tried to kill him several times. Jonathan had actually been nice to him, and David had made a promise to Jonathan saying, I want to be a blessing to your family. And then Jonathan had one child that was left after this whole problem. His name was Mephibosheth, who he'd become paralyzed in his feet. And David says, I want to do something nice for the son of Joshua that he finds out is alive. And he welcomes him to his house. And Mephibosheth thinks, I'm going to die because I'm like the kid of the other kingship. Mephibosheth assumes he's going to get killed. But instead, David welcomes him at his table and says, you will always be welcome at my table. And he gives him lands and all of these things. David shows really great hospitality. So Jesus, through his lineage, he has several pictures of hospitality. And so it's no surprise to me when Jesus starts teaching his disciples that. Over the last few months, we've been going through a series that I call Echoes and Thunder, where we're looking at what Jesus taught the Apostle John, and then how that changed John's life, and then how John echoed what Jesus said to those that came later, especially in the biblical books of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. So I've told you this long lead up to get to Jesus and John today. So Jesus had a moment where he sent his disciples out. And we heard about Jesus sending out 72 in Luke chapter 10, in Luke chapter 9, and also in Matthew. We see these things. So some of the instructions Jesus gives when he sends out his disciples, we see in Matthew 10, he says, you guys are going to survive on hospitality. So don't take any gold, don't take any silver or copper, don't take a change of clothes or sandals, don't even take a walking stick, but accept hospitality, for those who do the work deserve to be fed. And search for a worthy person when you get into a city, and stay in that home until you leave. Jesus is telling his disciples, I'm sending you out, and you need to rely on the hospitality of others. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you have to rely on the hospitality of someone else. We've sent out lots of mission teams from our church, and sometimes we have moments like what's happening with the Majorca team now, where they're stuck there an extra 4 or 5 days and have to rely on the organization there to continue to help them and watch out for them. Once when we had a team that went to Sweden. I've never been to Sweden before, and I'm a part of this group, and we're told once you get into the airport, just find the train and take the train a couple of stops and get off at this right spot, and hopefully all of the hosts for your homes will be there. We were hoping so as well. We took a few stops and we weren't sure which one it was. We're like, we get to a stop, and I think, are we there yet? And people are like, no, I think it's the next one. I'm like, oh, I'll stick my head out. I stick my head out, like, oh, those are those people. We have to get off the train now. We rushed. We actually did get off the train in time. Thankfully, everyone and all of their luggage, I was praying and thankful for God's help with that. But then there are these people that have never met us before. We knew one girl there, but then these other hosts, the man who hosted me, haven't met before, haven't met since. But he said, oh, okay, you three guys, you're coming with me. And so we had to walk through back alleys and places I've never known, get on a bus and go to some wherever place, and then eventually walk to his house. And his wife, this wonderful woman, I actually didn't see her for any of the 3 days we were there, but she had bought fresh towels just for us. And if you've ever had that feeling of just fresh towels before they've been washed and they start to lose their softness, it just feels so good. I'm a touch person. But I was totally relying on this man to take care of me and to help me know where am I going, what am I eating, what's going to happen. And we stayed in their house until we left. So Jesus sends his disciples that way. But it's not just the ones who go receiving hospitality, but he talks about the benefits of giving hospitality to people. Jesus later in that chapter said that anyone who accepts a prophet will receive the reward of a prophet. Anyone who receives, who welcomes hospitably a righteous person will receive that same reward. If you give even a cup of cold water to one of the least of these because of my name, surely you won't lose your reward for that. Keep in mind the idea of reward. That Jesus has taught John, go, receive hospitality, but also accept people and take in their hospitality. Now we flash forward decades when John is writing his own letters. And this is what John wrote to others in 2 John chapter 12, or 2 John verse 12, as well in 3 John, where he tells them, I really hope to visit you guys. I want to see you face to face. Short, sweet, easy verse. It doesn't tell you, oh, I'm going to stay at your house, but that's what's going to happen. It's like, hey, I'm going to show up. I really hope to visit you means get the guest room ready. I want to see you face to face. John, decades later, is still doing this, where he's traveling around and he's receiving hospitality from people. And then in 3 John, he talks about that other side. He's writing to someone he calls a dear friend, Gaius. And he says, you're being faithful to God when you care for the traveling teachers who pass through, even though they are strangers to you. Continue providing for such teachers. We ourselves should support them so that we can be partners as they teach the truth. And then the next verse, he talks about a man named Diotrephes. And John says, Diotrephes won't show hospitality to these people. Not only that, he's discouraging other people from welcoming them in. And John's mad about this lack of hospitality. He says, don't follow that example. Only follow the good examples. So John teaches the exact same thing Jesus taught. He says, give hospitality, receive hospitality, but he does give a warning, and that one I do want to mention. In 2 John 10, he says that if there's anyone that comes to your meeting, if there's anyone who's coming visiting you, and does not teach the truth about Christ, don't invite that person into your home or give really any kind of encouragement. He warns them, don't lose the reward, because by sharing with those people who do not continue in Jesus, you lose your reward. So, John says, do be careful with, you don't have to let every single person into your house. And if there's someone who's trying to honestly undermine the whole story of Jesus, don't encourage that. So, yes, we can be intentional with how we use hospitality. There is some warning to it. But in general, John seems to say, hey, help. And this idea of reward comes back again. Just like it was in Matthew, just like it was in 2 John. But the idea of giving a cup of cold water, we do have one other time in the Bible where that's mentioned, and it's actually in the book of Mark, and it's actually Jesus speaking directly to John. So John one time comes up to Jesus, and he's kind of happy with himself. Because he says, Jesus, we found a man who is casting out demons in your name. And I told him to stop, because he's not one of us. And he's like expecting a gold star or something. I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, if Jesus thought, oh, well, why do you call me Lord, Lord? If you don't do what I say. And he's like, oh, this guy isn't really yours. Whatever reason, John's like, I stopped him. Hey. And Jesus said, what are you doing? Don't stop him. Because he's not going to cast out a demon in my name and then the next moment say something bad about me. No, if you even give a cup of cold water to someone in my name, you will not lose your reward. If you give a cup of cold water to one of the least of these. And then he says, but anyone who causes one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck. Kind of not a nice way to go. Have you ever been like rebuked by a teacher? And do you remember it fairly well? Like there's some of those things that if a teacher says something like, what? It sticks. So is there any surprise that John would receive a rebuke from Jesus and then go, I'm going to remember that one for next time? This whole idea of showing hospitality to others would be something that meant a lot to him. And maybe just in general, the idea of hospitality, like, hey, that's great, I like it, this is a nice, easy sermon to kind of hear, and then maybe forget. Is it really that important? Well, let's look at something else Jesus said. Matthew chapter 25, Jesus is telling another story. He says there's going to be a king, and he'll have sheep, and he'll have goats, and we're looking at sort of the end of times. He said to the sheep, he's going to say, well done, you who are blessed by my Father, because when I was a stranger, you invited me in. Now, we've already seen that word stranger used by John in his epistles, but he said, you should take in these traveling teachers even if they're strangers to you. And Jesus says, I will tell these people they're blessed if they took in strangers. But then there's the other group of people, and he says, get away from me. Because when I was a stranger, you did not show me hospitality. You did not invite me in. And both groups are like, when did that happen? He said, whatever you did for the least of these, you've done it to me. So I don't want to blow hospitality out of proportion, but I also don't want to water it down. Jesus makes showing hospitality a big deal. And there are other parts with hospitality when Jesus says, if you invited me in as a stranger, if I was naked and you clothed me, if I was hungry, you fed me. All of these things have to do with the idea of hospitality, of how we treat others that are around us. So if Jesus makes it a big deal, should we do any less? And he focuses a lot on little kids with that. Why? He talks about the least of these are these little ones. Another story. 1989, I was just about to turn 6 years old, and also my family was just about to be homeless. My parents had been working on buying a house, but it wasn't going to actually close for a couple of weeks, and our landlords gave us a 2-week notice saying you have to be out of the house that you're living in 2 weeks. My parents, my dad was working way more than 40 hours a week, in part because my parents were in deep debt. And my mom is then having to take care of 3 kids, all under the age of 10, and in 2 weeks trying to find a new place to live and finding out where to put all the junk that accumulates after 10 years of children. From what I can tell, it accumulates in like the first 2 years, and then like you get more after that, but it doesn't take long. It was a stressful time period. And one of my family's great anthology stories about stress is from that. And there was a family, Sherman and Ellen Horton, who let us stay in their house for about a week. I don't think I'd ever met them before. My parents probably had, but when you're like a 6-year-old, you don't pay attention to your parents' friends all the time. But I know that they weren't close to us. They just found out about our situation, they let us stay with them. They ended up being a kind of wealthy family. And I wrote to my mom to just double check this information, because this is what a kid remembers. As a kid, I remembered. So they had a game room downstairs that included a pinball machine and a pool table. This is just a friendly, like 50s, 60s-year-old couple that has their own pinball machine. As a kid, I'm like, this is wonderful. But I got to have my 6th birthday party in probably the most luxurious house I have ever stayed in, instead of having to have my 6th birthday party in a hotel or on the street. To a little kid, that's pretty meaningful. Because, to me, strangers took us in for a week, and I remember it. Let me tell you one other story about it. The kid and an actual day of his birth. There is a young woman who was pregnant but engaged, but she got married and then had to travel with her husband to another town for a census that was going on. They likely stayed in the house of some relatives, but the house was full because of other people for the census. So when the baby was finally born, there wasn't any room in what would be the nice guest room, so they had to put the baby into a feeding trough for the animals that they would have had. Then there are these foreigners from the East that come over and give this kid some pretty awesome gifts like gold and other very expensive things, frankincense and myrrh. But then, because there's a crazy king who wants to kill all the children under 2 years old, his family has to become refugees in another country so that he's not killed off. Most people seem to notice this is the story of Jesus. You all thought at the beginning I was crazy when I said Merry Christmas? That was because of that. See, the story of Christmas is a story of lots of hospitality. Of people inviting them into the house, people giving a baby a place to stay, people giving gifts to a child, a country welcoming in foreigners, refugees. Why do I think hospitality was important to Jesus? Because it was built into his family. Whether it's his great-great-greats, or what his mom told him about the story of his birth when he's this little kid, or how Jesus lived his life from the age of 30 onward. We're told that he's traveling around and he tells people, I don't have my own bed. I don't have a place to lay my head. There are women who have money that are helping to take care of Jesus. He's eating in other people's houses very often. Jesus' life is hospitality from almost beginning to end. Even when he dies and he has to go into a tomb, there's a man who hospitably says, you can use my tomb. I mean, the dead body wasn't listening to him. But So what does that mean in your life? What can hospitality be? We have missionaries that come through this church every now and again, a couple times a year, and they often need a place to stay. And sometimes we stand up here in the announcements and say, oh, there's going to be a missions team if someone has a few beds. There's a really great chance to show some hospitality to people. August, September is coming, and that means a whole bunch of new students are moving into the city. And we've already had all these requests that sometimes show up on the city or on Facebook saying, oh, does anyone know a place to stay in Maastricht? There's a really great opportunity to show hospitality to people. It's been super hot. Jesus said if you even give a cup of cold water to somebody, there's a good start with hospitality. I mentioned I lived in the Caribbean for a couple years and over Christmas, and I wasn't allowed to take vacation during Christmas time, so I had to be on the island. I didn't have any family. And there was a family there who invited me to their house just for a few hours. And they gave me a gift. It was just a thing of cologne. It's still mine and my wife's favorite cologne that I have. I've had it for 12 years. That shows how quickly I use it. But, it wasn't a cup of cold water. It was eau de toilette. But God has a reward for them, even for something as simple as that. And trust me, there's so many people in the city, so many people in this church who are away from family over a holiday or just over a regular old Sunday that could use an invitation, maybe a special gift just because Merry Christmas in July. We have opportunities to show hospitality to people. Trust me, you do. Let's take them. Let's find Jesus in some strangers. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for being so hospitable to create a world for us to live in. And then sort of reversing the roles so that we had the opportunity to show hospitality to your son Jesus when he came to earth, even though we didn't do it especially well. That you are wanting to make us more in your image, and you are a God who takes care of others. You take care of apostles and missionaries and prophets and those that travel for the work of God, and you take care of children and needy and weak people. May we do the same. May we see the opportunities and take them. Because we want to love you. In Jesus' name.